unworthiness, depression, and anxiety, they all have the same root issues.
Do you feel like no one sees you or even cares about you, even when you're with people you know and love?
I mean, what would it be like if you could experience a deep feeling of being nurtured, seen, cared for, heard, and valued? Without experiencing these feelings, your life is going to continue to be a series of broken relationships, broken hopes, and dreams.
You're unfulfilled. You're empty. Every day you come up and feel so alone.
Well, we want you to know the truth is you are not alone. And in this video, we're going to give you some very practical steps to help you deal with what every human faces in their life. The emotional climate that you grew up in has a profound effect upon your daily life.
When you are growing up in your home, ages 0 to 7, a child is in what we call the alpha brain waves. What this really means is they're just like a sponge, and they are soaking up everything of the environment of the home. If the environment of the home is healthy and happy and just a lot of fun, all of that is going into the child. They have no ability, no skill level to discern if the stove is hot. So when a child is going over to the stove to touch it and it's hot, Mama doesn't say in a real happy voice, "Oh, honey, don't touch that stove." Mama raises her voice in an immediate reaction that would cause the child to be deterred from what they're doing and look at Mama. And so they begin to absorb all of the environment. Now, if it's a real negative environment, that child is also absorbing that into their body, again, not having an ability to discern what is good or bad. And so once they get past that alpha brainwave at the age of 6 to 7, they begin to develop skills, critical thinking skills, that give them the ability to deal with the home environment.
But from the age of 0 to 7, they are seeing how do the parents handle anger or the guardians? How do they handle frustration? How do they handle joy? Mm-hmm. How do they handle success and failure? Mm-hmm. And how the child views what's happening in the home, it's written upon their minds, in their brains.
So
like
good.
You said, they're in that alpha state and their brain is recording. So when they grow up in life, when we grow up, we get into a situation that somehow has a few similarities to how we grew up. And all of a sudden, we are reacting more than we're responding. We may even wonder, why am I having such a strong reaction here? They were just socks on the floor. It's no big deal. It doesn't mean I'm not cared about. Why am I reacting like that? Well, it's because the record in the brain recorded the words and the emotional climate of the home that we grew up in.
It's like our bodies begin to hardwire to certain emotional responses, and we elicit chemicals from our brain according to those neurological pathways that are now firing and wiring. And so when we start to grow up, we're fired and wired to certain chemicals, and we need those chemicals in our bodies. So we will take a situation and turn it according to what we were programmed in those immediate years, in those former years as a child, without really even recognizing what we're doing.
That's called the unconscious mind. And the unconscious mind is working constantly. The conscious mind makes choices. The unconscious mind just reacts. And right here, this is another important key, but the biggest key of all is going to be in just a minute. You're going to want to stay with us.
That's it.
Because we're going to bring all of this to a closure, and I believe it's going to be really helpful for you. So if any of this is making sense, or you're tracking with us, or you're like, yeah, I'm right there with you, give us a thumbs up, put your comments there. We'd love to hear from you. So that unconscious mind, we grow up, now we have jobs, and or maybe we're students, or maybe we're married with children, and similar situations happen in our homes. It happened growing up. They don't have to be unusual. They can actually be simple things like eating dinner, cleaning dishes, things like that. And we are reacting rather than responding.
You know, I can remember when I was young, I went through a pretty traumatic divorce at a very, very young age. I was married young back then. That's what you did. And so I went through a traumatic divorce. And years later, getting into some other relationship issues, I had never fully consciously dealt with the hurt and the trauma from that divorce. And unconsciously, what I was doing was sabotaging my relationships as an adult that I had carried over from how I learned to cope with, or lack of coping with, issues of the trauma, because I didn't have trauma growing up. And so I carried that over and had to learn some new skills at a later date in my life. However, I wasn't even aware or conscious that I was doing these things because I'd hardwired some things inside of me.
That means you were reacting, not responding.
Right.
I know a big one for me was as a child. I remember waiting a lot for one of my parents to pick me up. My father was a very successful attorney and judge, and my mother was busy doing all kinds of important social things in her life. And I can remember waiting and waiting for them to pick me up on several occasions. Well, when I got older, if I'm in a grocery store or somewhere in a store, and whoever I'm with walks off and doesn't tell me where they are, and I'm just sitting there and waiting, I get so triggered. And it happened just the other day. And so I moved from my unconscious just reaction. Why'd you do that? Why didn't you tell me where you were? I'm just sitting here waiting, being mad. Instead of doing that, which is a reaction, I moved to a response. And here's the key. Are you all ready for this?
Come on.
This is the big one.
This is it.
I was able to move from reaction to response because I remembered that I'm actually deeply loved and cared for. I am deeply loved and cared for by Adonai. I am deeply loved and cared for by myself. And I am deeply loved and cared for by those people in my life that I'm close to. Now, this is the key. Love is the key. Love is the problem and the desire of every human's heart. But what if you don't feel loved? That's a reaction. And you can choose a response rather than a reaction by connecting with your heart, by just telling yourself that you love you and opening your heart for the creator of the universe who adores you, here's the key, unconditionally. To feel what it feels like to be loved unconditionally will move you to the place of responding rather than reacting.
It is so important for us to become aware of what we are not aware of. In my case, I was not even aware that I was doing certain things and reacting certain ways until I recognized that there was a connection between this place in my life and that emotion to this one. Once I became aware of it and connected the dots, I realized that I was feeling like I wasn't loved, that I felt like no one cared about me. No one was concerned what was happening to me. And then when I realized that that was what was going on, I could switch the story and say, I am loved, I am valued, and I am cared for.
Well, we've talked about some important things here. Number one, if you grew up in a home where there was a lot of anger or a lot of hurt or a lot of chaos, that wrote something on your unconscious plate here, your mind, and it may be causing you to react rather than respond. But you get to make a choice. If you will remember that you are loved, and you're loved by a God who put you together in your mother's womb, who loves you unconditionally, beyond any behaviors, whether they're good or they're not good. He just loves you. If you can remember that you're loved and allow that feeling to come alive inside your heart, just connect with the feeling of love, you'll move from reacting to responding. And if you find that you are easily triggered on particular topics or particular situations, kind of like what we were talking about there, not being told where someone is when they walk off, and I'm having to wait. If you find yourself being in that place, if you're reacting strongly to a situation or a person, then you'll know that you're triggered. And if you want to know how to respond rather than react when triggered, watch this next video.
Well, we hope that you've enjoyed this today. I want you to know we love hearing from you. Please put some things in those comments. It has been our pleasure to be with you today.
And we are the Hebrew
Hebrew
Sisters
Sisters.
right here at HebrewScrollsAcademy.com.